Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Bravery is not a baked-in personality trait. That bravery is actually a habit. It's a discipline that we can train ourselves to exhibit. We conflate bravery with boldness. And we also conflate cowardice with wisdom. In those moments when we're tempted with cowardice, we can ask ourselves, okay, am I afraid to act because I don't have a clear vision of where I'm going, or I don't have a vision of a better possible future? Or am I afraid to act because I don't trust that I have agency to be able to create meaningful change in the direction of my vision?
That's Todd Henry. He shares his insights into creativity as an author, keynote speaker, and podcaster to help folks be brave, focused, and brilliant. Here, he's sharing powerful advice for overcoming fear and uncertainty from his latest book, The Brave Habit. I'm Pete Mockaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Todd. Todd, welcome back.
Pete, it is so good to be back on this show. Thanks for the kind invitation.
Oh, thank you. You got a fresh book, and you've studied a lot of interesting things and written a lot of cool books. I'm curious, why bravery as the topic now?
10 years ago, I wrote a book called Die Empty. It released and did really well. But there was something that I overlooked in that book, and it always plagued me. There was one topic that I didn't write about, and it was kind of one of those forehead slap moments when I realized, oh, there's kind of an important thing I overlooked here. And that topic was bravery, because I talk about all the ways that we can overcome these hurdles we encounter, these pitfalls when doing difficult creative work, and some strategies for doing that. But the one key element that I found in people and in teams who were willing and able to do that was that they exhibited bravery. And so I kind of committed to looking into, to investigating that topic of bravery. And my ingoing assumption was that, some people are just wired for it. They're just more risk tolerant, and some people aren't. But the more I researched the topic, I realized actually bravery is exhibited in all different kinds of places by all different kinds of people, and people who historically had not exhibited bravery suddenly started exhibiting bravery, and vice versa. And what I realized was that bravery is not a baked-in personality trait, that bravery is actually a habit. It's a discipline that we can train ourselves to exhibit. So that was kind of the initial source of the book. And so for the last 6 years, it's been a passion project. I've been working on this book, and it took me 6 years to kind of pull it all together. And now it's finally here. So it's called The Brave Habit, and it's about how to develop the habit of bravery as you approach creative work, leadership, relationships, and everything that you have to do in life.
All right. Well, tell us, what impact does having upgraded bravery deliver for us?
So I think that we often conflate two things. We conflate bravery with boldness, and we also conflate cowardice with wisdom. And what I mean by that is we all have moments in our life where we recognize an opportunity, where we see that there's something possible for us if we were willing to act, but there's a little voice inside of us that says, well, maybe it would be better if, or maybe someone else is better equipped to, or you really don't have the skills to, or things of that nature. And that's really cowardice whispering in our ear, but we often conflate it with wisdom. We think this is wisdom speaking to us. And what I discovered was that there really are two things that comprise bravery in those moments. There are two core attributes, two core traits that people who consistently ignore the voice of cowardice that comes disguised as wisdom and instead choose to engage in brave action. There are two core attributes that they tend to exhibit in those moments. The first is they have an optimistic vision of the future, meaning that they have a vision of a better possible future that they could be navigating toward. And the second attribute that they tend to exhibit is a sense of perceived agency to bring that better possible future about. So think about a team. When I look at the teams who are consistently doing what I would consider to be brave work, they're teams who have a vision that they're navigating toward. They have a very clear North Pole that they believe in and that they're willing, if necessary, to sacrifice on behalf of because they believe deeply in that vision, versus people who have kind of a pessimistic vision of the future. Well, I really don't know what the future holds and who can really tell anyway, right? And so that's sort of the opposite of what I'm talking about. And they tend to have a sense of agency, meaning, and we believe that we have the platform, the proficiency, that we have people around us who can help us accomplish that vision. So when you have those two attributes, you've created a fertile field within which bravery is likely to occur. Now, it doesn't mean it will occur, but you're creating a fertile field within which bravery is likely to occur. So how does that play out for us as individuals in the workplace? Well, we all have to confront uncertainty. We have big projects we're working on, ideas maybe that are noodling around the back of our mind, and we're thinking about bringing them into the world. But that little voice of cowardice is whispering in our ear, well, maybe somebody else would be better suited to do that. Well, maybe you should wait and let somebody else step up. Well, maybe you're not the right person to lead this. Or, well, maybe you need to do a power grab because you need to prove that you're the right person. Well, that's not necessarily bravery. That's just boldness, right? So we have these little voices whispering in the back of our ear. In those moments when we're tempted with cowardice, we can ask ourselves, okay, am I afraid to act because I don't have a clear vision of where I'm going, or I don't have a vision of a better possible future? Or am I afraid to act because I don't trust that I have agency to be able to create meaningful change in the direction of my vision? And simply by asking ourselves those questions consistently, by putting some qualifiers on what we feel inherently, that self-protection instinct that we have, we can A, develop a better narrative to help ourselves get through those moments, and B, identify any areas where maybe we are lacking. We tend to think bravery is, well, just do it, just leap, just jump from the cliff, right? Just say the thing, just have the conversation. That's not necessarily always bravery. Sometimes that's boldness. Boldness and bravery are not necessarily the same thing. Sometimes bravery means waiting until the right time. So when you ask yourself those questions, do I have a clear vision of where I'm going? And do I trust that I have the agency to be able to bring it about? If the answer to either of those is no, maybe the bravest thing you can do is wait as your vision is clarified, or wait until you develop the skill necessary to bring it about. That doesn't mean you're being a coward. That means you're being strategic. And so when you ask, how does bravery benefit us? It benefits us by giving us a sense of the places in our life where we can act in a meaningful way to develop our capacity to do work that is surprising, valuable, and ultimately contributive to the body of work that we want to build.
Now, I think there's a lot of interesting tidbits here in terms of the voice of cowardice can be sneaky, and we may not even recognize that that's what that is. I remember we had Kwame Christian say once earlier on the show that fear masquerades in many forms. And I thought that was really clever in terms of maybe it's procrastination, or, maybe this isn't the right time. Like any number of voices, and it's good to just say, oh no, what's really happening is I'm scared. What's really missing here is bravery. And you've done a cool segmentation. And so is it a matter of vision or a matter of agency? And help me out. When I'm feeling unbrave, I think what's going on is there's a substantial chance that this is going to go badly for me. And so do we categorize that as a vision matter or an agency matter, or where does that fall into your schema?
Well, that's a really great example. Can I tell you a story of how that's playing out actually for me right now?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, I've been doing the Accidental Creative Podcast since 2005. As I was writing this book, I began challenging people in the book to ask some really brave questions, some very dangerous questions maybe. And among those questions that I began asking myself was, if I were starting over again, would I be doing things the way that I'm doing them right now? And the uncomfortable answer that I came to, Pete, was no, I wouldn't. Like, it's fine. It's working. People seem to enjoy it. It's great. But would I be doing it this way? No. Why? Because I have a vision of a way that things could be better. And I was feeling a little bit of discontentment around the way I was doing things. Well, there's a lot of cost involved in changing something that has a substantial audience and that has been successful and that's financially contributive to, the bottom line of my business. There's a substantial risk involved. And to your point, you asked the question, well, what if this goes badly for me? Yeah, there's a lot of risk involved in doing something like that. What compelled me to make the change that we made, which was basically completely rebranding the show, redoing the format, and eliminating thousands of back episodes of the podcast and starting over with episode 1 on January 1st, What compelled me to do it was that vision. I knew I had the agency to bring it about because I've created podcasts. I know how to do this. I know how to do creative work and make audio shows. But the vision was what compelled me. I had a very clear vision of what this could be. And so the question I asked myself was, if I fail, will it be worth it if it's in pursuit of a vision that I care about? And the answer was yes. And like Seth Godin likes to say, this might not work, right? And it might not work. It still might not work. But the vision superseded my fear of failure in this case. And so my response was, if it fails, I want to go down doing the thing that I believe to be the right thing. I want to pursue the vision for the work that I think is the best possible manifestation of this kind of work that I'm trying to do right now. And so I think to answer your question, that you have to be able to say it's worth failing in the pursuit of this vision. It's worth sacrificing something in the pursuit of this vision if I believe it's the right direction. And that doesn't mean that's always the case for everyone. In my case, it was. But the problem is we often don't stop to ask the question because we just assume that the goal of life is to protect, to be comfortable. Khalil Gibran said, "Verily, the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul and then walks grinning in the funeral." Right? So when we succumb to the love of comfort, the lust for comfort, we murder our own soul. And so the challenge I would have for listeners is, where are you falling prey to the love of comfort? Not comfort itself. There's nothing wrong with comfort. But when you fall in love with comfort, you're inherently going to compromise what's possible because nothing great is ever done from a position of comfort.
Okay. So then it sounds like the fear I have that things are going to go badly in your categorization system, that's a matter of the vision may not be clear or strong enough to overpower in the internal tug of war, the reluctance or internal fear.
Yeah, that's right. Or in some cases, like in organizations, it could be that vision just hasn't been communicated clearly enough, or people don't understand how they play into that vision. There are a lot of organizations with people who are more than willing to be brave and to do brave work and to have brave conversations and to confront uncertainty, but they don't really understand how their efforts would matter because the leader hasn't given a compelling vision for where the organization is going. And so the net result is you have all these people who are at the ready, they want to do something, but they don't really know what to do. Or you have organizations where the leader is casting vision constantly, but they're not reinforcing the agency. They try to be over-controlling in their organization. They step in and do the work for people instead of equipping people and giving them agency to do their own work, to come up with their own ideas, right? And the net result of that is people just feel powerless. They just succumb and they say, okay, fine, just tell me what to do. Well, are they going to do brave work? No, of course not, because they've been robbed of a sense of agency. And so as leaders of organizations, the biggest gift that we can give to people is to position them in places where bravery is likely to occur, which means being very clear about our vision, but also speaking agency into them, speaking encouragement into them, giving them the ability to try things, to experiment, even to fail in small ways that aren't fatal to the organization, right? So that they have that sense of agency to act bravely in the face of uncertainty.
All right, let's maybe zoom way in. Let's say we have an individual and they want to say something that may be uncomfortable, unpopular, because they are going against the status quo, they're challenging someone, so they might get offended, outraged, create some political rifts, etc. Help us out, Todd. What are the key steps to follow in order to speak up when bravery is required?
So you have to be absolutely certain that your action is in the service of a vision of a better possible future. It's not self-serving. It's not bold, because boldness is mostly self-serving. Bravery is always empathetic. So how is speaking up going to be in service of a greater vision, whether that's creating a better environment on the team, communicating something to the leader that maybe they're not aware of and they need to be aware of because it's impacting everyone else around us? So if the answer to that is yes, and the second question you have to ask is, am I the right person to have this conversation? Because if a random person, a low level of an organization, decides to ambush the CEO in the lobby of the building one day and say something, well, you have no agency, you have no platform. You're doing something, but that's just boldness. That's not necessarily bravery, because what impact is that going to have? Probably very little impact, right? And in fact, it could be detrimental to the overall cause. And so those are the two questions you have to ask. Am I doing this in the service of a better vision, a greater vision, or am I just doing this to be self-serving for my own political purposes? And the second question you have to ask is, am I the right person to be able to do this? Do I have the agency? Do I have the platform to be able to do this? And if the answer to that second question is no, well, then who does have the platform? Who am I connected to, who I might be able to then have this conversation with? And we can go together to the leader. We can go together to whoever this person is and have a conversation together, because the other person has platform. They have relationship. They have credibility that maybe I don't have. So again, this framework helps you in those moments where you have to make a brave decision. It helps you sort of gauge and diagnose places where, well, why do I feel hesitant to do this? Oh, it's because I don't really have the agency to do this. I could just go ambush this person with a conversation, but they're not going to listen to me because I don't have the right platform. But I do know someone who does. So I'm going to go to them. We're going to have a conversation and we're going to go together to them. And then we're going to have a higher probability chance of creating the change we're trying to create, right? So 2 questions. Again, is this in service of a greater vision or in service of me? That's the empathy question. And then the second one is, do I have the credibility, the platform, the proficiency to be able to have this conversation? If not, then how can I gain that agency in order to create this meaningful change toward the vision that I'm pursuing?
Okay. Well, could you maybe share some stories in which we've got a professional who is finding they would like an upgrade to their bravery, and then they walked these paths of upgrading the vision or upgrading the agency to make it happen?
Yeah. So there's an example I shared in the book of a guy named Scott. Scott was a commercial real estate agent, and it was the very fortuitous time of the late 2000s, so right around 2008. You can kind of imagine where this story is going, because we experienced a tremendous collapse in the real estate industry and thus the entire economy in 2008. And so Scott was really in danger of just being without a livelihood. And so he was talking with his wife, and they were expecting their first child. And, it's obviously a really kind of nerve-wracking time for them. And he was considering the possibility of making a transition into doing residential real estate, but he didn't really have a tremendous amount of experience doing residential real estate. So he had a job offer to go sell office furniture. And he was thinking about just going to sell office furniture because this is something that can pay the bills with our first child on the way. And as he was talking about this with his wife said, hey, listen, you have all of this experience in the real estate industry. You have some connections in the real estate industry, albeit not in the residential real estate industry. And you have a very clear vision of how you could do this differently, how you could be a different kind of real estate agent that could be more attractive to people, that could actually be kind of a partner with people rather than just, sort of being the go-between in these transactions. And she said, let's do this. Let's establish a time frame. Let's call it 6 months. And why don't you try this? Let's see what happens. And if we see some momentum, then we'll keep moving forward. And if we don't, then, you can always go take the office furniture job and we'll just say, okay, now you're an office furniture salesman or whatever. So he did. So he decided to launch his real estate practice, and it did not go well for the first handful of months. It was a really difficult time in the market, but just in the nick of time, he did make his first sale, and that was enough to generate some cash flow and kind of keep the business moving forward. And the way that he did it was because he was following his vision of a better possible future, the way that things could be different in the real estate industry. And the reason I share that story is because his instinct in the moment was, well, I just need to retreat to the easiest thing I can do, which is go take a salaried job to pay the bills, right? Someone else came along, someone who had a very vested interest in his success came along and spoke agency into him, said, hey, you could do that. That's fine, but that's not what you're capable of. You don't even know what you're capable of yet. We haven't even tried yet. You have agency you haven't even tapped into. So why don't you go try this? I see what you're capable of. I know what you're capable of. You have a vision. Go try this. He had someone, his wife, who spoke courage into him. And so Scott did. because she put him in that very fertile field where brave action is likely to occur, that place of agency and vision. Now, 10 years later, his real estate practice is one of the top real estate practices in the country within his company, which is remarkable. But even if it hadn't worked out that way, would he have made the brave choice? Even if it hadn't worked out for him, would he have made the brave choice? The answer, I believe, is yes, absolutely, because bravery has nothing to do with outcomes. You can make a good decision, Pete, that has a bad outcome. And you can make a bad decision that has a good outcome. That's why it's so difficult often to analyze our decisions, because we tend to associate our outcomes with our decisions. But the reality is we make decisions with the best information we have at the time. And we can't always control where those decisions are going to lead. And so even if Scott had failed, he still made a brave choice. And it still was probably a good decision for him to try it, to see if he could make it work. And that's part of the thing that I think leads us to succumb to cowardice, is that we are constantly analyzing our past decisions through our present understanding. And the net result is that we think that things were bad decisions when actually they may have been good decisions that just had bad outcomes. We made the best decision we could at the time. So I think that story of Scott is one that kind of illustrates what it looks like to have someone speaking agency and optimism into you in those moments of uncertainty.
That's lovely. Thank you. And we had Annie Duke, a professional poker player, say a similar point in terms of you may have made the best decision, though the outcome didn't work out. And that doesn't mean it wasn't the best decision. So that's good to consider. I'd love to hear the counterpoint to that in terms of we may be more likely to regret what we didn't do. How do we judiciously, astutely, wisely, prudently determine, this harebrained scheme of mine, I should kill right now rather than pursue it to my detriment?
Yeah. So interestingly, we're doing an episode of our podcast that kind of deals with that. How sometimes we get frozen in these moments. And as part of the interview, we revisited a conversation with Seth Godin about his book, The Dip. And I don't know if you're familiar with the book.
Oh, yeah. It was short. I read it. It was fun.
Yeah, fantastic. But in the book, he talks about the two ways that we get stuck. The first way is what he calls a cul-de-sac, which is basically a dead end, where we're just going round and round and round and round the cul-de-sac. And it feels like we're making progress, but really we're just stuck. We don't really have a vision. And the best thing to do in the cul-de-sac is just to quit, because you're never going to get anywhere if you're in a cul-de-sac. And then he said the second kind of place where we get stuck is in what he calls the dip. And the dip is that inevitable, difficult moment after we've started a creative project. And we have all this energy at the beginning because it's new and it's fresh and we have a vision. And then it gets really hard. And so a lot of people give up. Scott Belsky calls this the project plateau, right? It's the moment where it starts getting really hard, but we don't have the same excitement about the work. And so we tend to want to quit, but you don't quit in the dip. If you have a vision of the way things could be and you can see a path to get there, you don't quit in the dip. You keep pushing, you keep going, because there are rewards on the other side. So that's when we talk about a vision of a better possible future and the agency to bring it about. That's really kind of where I'm playing as well, is when you get into those moments where you're in the dip and it's uncertain, you don't know what to do, and you don't know if you really feel like pushing forward. If you have a vision, you need to push forward. If you believe that you have the agency, the will, the capability to bring that about, you need to push forward. Not only do you need it, we need you to push forward, because that's how the world moves forward. So if you're in a cul-de-sac, quit. If you have no vision, quit. If you don't believe you have the agency, just quit, right? Or develop it, develop the vision, develop the agency. But if you're in the dip, the brave thing to do is to keep moving forward.
All righty. Okay. Well, Todd, I would love to get your perspective. Do you any top do's or don'ts for folks looking to be awesome at their job as they are contemplating this bravery stuff?
Yeah, the main thing, and this is why the book is called The Brave Habit, is that bravery is a habit, which means that we can build practices into our life to prepare us for moments where we need to be brave. So the main do, I would say, is have some time that you block off in your life, and I walk people through this in the book, where you basically follow BRAVE, which is basically block time once a week to look at your calendar, look at your commitments, look at everything coming up in your life that week, conversations you're going to have, projects you're accountable for. So block the time. And the reason I say that first is because it seems like an obvious thing, but we don't do it. We don't plan time for the things that are most important, right? The second part is review. Review upcoming conversations that maybe you're a little nervous about. Review client projects, conversations that you're going to be having, and review them for points of uncertainty, for tensions that you know are inevitably going to be there. The third is claim agency, meaning assess what agency you have in those moments. What are you bringing to those moments that you uniquely are able to contribute? Why are you the right person to have that conversation? Why are you the right person to do that project? So reroot yourself in your sense of agency. The fourth is vision. So what is your vision for each of those relationships, for each of those projects, for your work as a whole, your vision for your life, your vision for your relationships? What is your vision? Reroot yourself. And then finally, express your intent. That's the E part. Express your intent, meaning here is the outcome that I am committed to for each of these areas. By doing this, what you're doing is getting ahead of those moments. We're often surprised by these moments where we have to be brave, right? We come into a conversation and we're completely ill-prepared because we haven't done the pre-work to set ourselves up for bravery, for exhibiting bravery in the moment. But again, as we get ahead of it and as we build practices to prepare us for those moments, then in the moment itself, we're not reacting, we're simply enacting the plan that we've already put in place, that we know that we're going to enact. And then as we do that consistently over time, it becomes more of a habit for us.
Okay, lovely. And any don'ts?
The biggest don't, and this is, by the way, true of anything that we do as creative professionals, people who have to solve problems, is don't wing it. Talent gets you in the game, but your practices keep you in the game. Talent is the price of entry. People think they can wing their entire career based on talent alone. You cannot. You will eventually fail. You'll eventually succumb to the negative drag forces of the marketplace. You have to have practices in your life to prepare you for those moments and to help you be successful. And so that would be the biggest thing, is don't wing it. Have practices in your life to prepare you for critical moments.
All right. Well, Todd, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
I think the biggest thing that I would encourage people to consider is, listen, your life is comprised of moments, and how you approach those moments is going to define your life. We tend to think of life as a passage of days and years and months and whatever. And it's true, but the reality is some of those moments are weighted far more significantly than others. And how you respond in critical moments in your life is going to determine the arc of your life and ultimately the body of work that you build, the relationships you have, and the degree to which you have deep regret later in your life. So your moment is coming. Make sure that you're prepared for that moment when it arrives.
All right. Now, could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Thomas Merton is one of my favorite thinkers, one of my favorite writers. And he once wrote, "There can be an intense egoism in following everyone else. People are in a hurry to magnify themselves by imitating what is popular and too lazy to think of anything better. Hurry ruins saints as well as artists. They want quick success, and they're in such a hurry to get it, they cannot take time to be true to themselves. And when the madness is upon them, they justify their haste as a species of integrity."
Okay. And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
So one thing that was really interesting to me in researching this book, I came across the work of a couple of key people. One was Martin Seligman, who is known as the father of positive psychology. And the other was Albert Bandura, who did significant research into agency and how agency affects us. And one of the key tidbits that came out of the research was that people who live with an optimistic mindset versus a pessimistic mindset tend to outlive people who have a pessimistic mindset in their life, to the extent that people who live with a generally pessimistic mindset exhibit health effects that are similar to smoking packs of cigarettes a day in their life. Those are the kinds of health effects that they experience. Pessimism has such a negative drag on your physical health that it's the equivalent of smoking packs of cigarettes a day. So I thought that was pretty fascinating, actually.
All right. And a favorite book?
I was watching a video of a guy who was talking about the 5-foot shelf of books, which is the complete Harvard classics, which were assembled like in the early 1900s by the president of Harvard. And he said, if you read these books, this 5-foot shelf of books, you will have all that you need in terms of like a Western liberal education. And so I decided to commit myself to reading the complete Harvard classics.
Okay. Could you share with us a couple titles that we'd recognize and a couple titles that we wouldn't?
Absolutely. So right now I'm in the midst of the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which is the very first part.
Oh, that's so good. All right. And a favorite tool, something you use to help you be awesome at your job.
The tool that I use more than any other tool right now as a podcaster, as a content creator, is Descript. It has radically changed my world. And I don't say that very often. I'm not like a big jump on the bandwagon of a tool kind of guy, but Descript has completely changed my world. If you do any audio or video creating, you 100% need to be using Descript.
All right. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
The one that I see circulating the most, because it got picked up by some of the like habit apps and things, is don't let your rituals become ruts. And so I think every so often it's important to do a review of your rituals and make sure that they're still serving you and they're not just there for you to serve them.
All right. And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where would you point them?
So toddhenry.com is my personal website. You can find all my books. Our podcast is called Daily Creative with Todd Henry. We just started over with episode 1. So you could listen to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. My books are at toddhenry.com or wherever you buy your books. The Brave Habit is available now.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
It's really important that we understand that your time is finite. And this is almost something we say so often that becomes cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. It's because it's true. And so treat today, treat this moment, treat your next conversation, treat the project you're working on, not as if it's going to be your last, but as if it's going to be your legacy. We often hear this advice, live every day as if it's your last. And I think that's terrible advice, because if it was my last day, I'm going to eat donuts and do whatever I want to do, right? Because I don't have to worry about my health. Instead, I like to think, what if today was my legacy? What if this was the only day? What if a biographer was going to follow me around today and look at everything I do and then was going to write the story of my life based on this day? How might I approach this day differently? How might I approach that next conversation or that conflict differently? How much effort might I put into this project I'm working on?
Beautiful. Well, Todd, thank you. I wish you much fun and bravery.
Well, thank you. And thanks so much for having me on the show. And thanks for the great work that you do.
I really dig Todd's perspective on, will this thing be worth pursuing even if I fail? You can imagine a world in which you go after a thing, it doesn't work out, and you can still feel proud about the contribution that you made, the learnings that you did, who you became or grew into along the way. And that is a really cool way to reframe the whole question or situation. Like, oh, I don't know, I might fail, I might screw this up. Well, hey, that's true, I might. But will it still be worth pursuing even if I do? Will I feel proud and happy that I did so? And in exploring it from that vantage point, suddenly things feel less spooky and more possible. Great stuff from Todd. If you want to read a summary write-up of Todd's insights, as well as unlock the archive of all of these summaries, those are called the Gold Nuggets at awesomeatyourjob.com. And if you want to see the particular transcript and show notes from this conversation, it's found at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP933. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full-text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.